climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Race to Power. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and on the show today, the question, of course, is this: will he or won't he? After the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa had indicated that the United States won't boycott the G20 summit and that there will be some form of American representation, the White House's press secretary Caroline Leavitt has said that Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, is just running his mouth. But what really is the truth? And in the United States of America, the Trump administration has now been faced with a pretty embarrassing legal setback. A federal judge has ordered for a halt on the deployment of National Guard troops in the capital, Washington, D.C. South Africa is rolling out the red carpet. It is ready to host the leaders of the G20 summit over the course of the next 2 days. However, a major G20 member nation, the United States of America, will be skipping the summit in Johannesburg. The ties have taken a bit of a nosedive since the American President Donald Trump, remember, had hosted the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa at the White House earlier this year. Now, Trump had opted to exclude the United States entirely from the summit back then, marking the first time in the group's 26-year history that a member state has not only avoided sending its head of the government, but has also refused to participate at any level. But a lot has happened in the last 24 hours. Just last night, the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa was all smiles when he announced that the United States is now rethinking its decision to boycott the upcoming summit, and that Washington now seems ready to participate in some shape or form at the G20 summit.
We have received notice from the United States, a notice which we are still in discussions with them over, about a change of mind about participating in one shape, form or other in the summit.
The news, however, has not gone down well at the White House, where the press secretary Caroline Leavitt said that the South African president is just running his mouth. She further added that Ramaphosa's comments are not appreciated by the American President Donald Trump or his team.
States is not participating in official talks at the G20 in South Africa. I saw the South African president running his mouth a little bit against the United States and the president of the United States earlier today, and that language is not appreciated by the president or his team. The ambassador or the representative of the embassy in South Africa is simply there to recognize that the United States will be the host of the G20. They are receiving that send-off at the end of the event. They are not there to participate in official talks, despite what the South African president is falsely claiming.
Now, after the White House denied Ramaphosa's statement, South African president's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, wrote on social media that the president would not hand over the G20 presidency to an acting American ambassador. The tensions between the two men, remember, had come to a head at the Oval Office meeting in the month of May, when Cyril Ramaphosa had to endure a heated exchange with Donald Trump in front of the global cameras. Now, Donald Trump put out some videos claiming that the Afrikaner, that is the white minority community, are suffering human rights abuses in South Africa. Now, following this spat, Ramaphosa had said that he expects Donald Trump to attend the G20 summit in Johannesburg in November, despite the showdown that took place at the White House, adding that he doesn't want to pass on the baton to an empty chair.
I want to hand over the presidency of the G20 to President Trump in November. And I said, he needs to be there. I don't want to hand over the presidency of the G20 to an empty chair. I want to hand it over to him sitting in that chair in November. And he is going to give serious consideration to it. In fact, I expect him to be coming to South Africa.
All right, so that was Cyril Ramaphosa earlier in the month of May this year. Now, to make sense of all of this, we're joined on this broadcast by our correspondents who are joining us live. Calden Ongmu is joining us from Johannesburg in South Africa, which, of course, remember, is the venue of the G20 summit. And to get the American perspective, we have our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who's joining us live from New York. But Calden, let me in fact start with you in this case. Give us a sense of what's actually, gone behind the scenes before Cyril Ramaphosa expressed some pretty clearly that he expected that the United States will take part in some form or another at the G20 summit, even though the American president had been pretty clear that he is not going to be there.
Yes, Mohammed, if I can take you back to the earlier months of 2025, where South Africa and US, it started from there. From the start, US president and South Africa has been at a go. It started from where President Donald Trump started accusing South Africa of white genocide in the country, which South Africa, many times, several times, they have said that there's nothing of that sort. And what US is accusing South Africa is baseless and it is not factual. Then most of the experts in South Africa and even around the globe stated that the hatred, the Trump, the back and forth between Trump administration and South Africa could be because of the issue of the Israeli, the case against the Israelis at the ICC. So it emanated from there. But throughout the year, then came the tariff, where Trump has imposed 30% tariff on South Africa. Time and again, Donald Trump has always accused South Africa, saying South Africa is doing very bad things and he doesn't want to participate in G20. But if you remember a few weeks back, actually Donald Trump had actually stated that they will participate, and the Vice President of the United States was supposed to come. From the memos that the US and South Africa, the Department of International Relations had been sharing, they were in fact preparing for the Vice President to come to South Africa to attend the G20. But then again, a few days back in Miami, Florida, when he was addressing the gathering, by mistake, instead of saying South America, he went on to say South Africa. And from that stemmed this, where, I think he shocked not just South Africa, but also his own people in America, where he stated that he does not want to come to South Africa. They will boycott G20. So from there it started. And South Africa was very frank, to be very honest with you. South Africa had moved on. In fact, you have sound bites from the foreign minister as well as Ramaphosa saying the G20 Leaders Summit will go on with or without US. But then you have the bombshell, what you just read in your video, saying, there was a memo that was gone viral yesterday from the embassy of Pretoria, from US embassy, that came and, detailing things like, they would be attending the G20, but only the handover ceremony towards the end. From there, again, tit for tat from both the countries is going on. Ramaphosa has clearly said that he will not hand over the G20 presidency to a lower level American official.
An acting ambassador of the United States is what has been said by South Africa. Calden, do stay on with us. Let me, in fact, go across to my colleague Susan Tehrani, who's joining us live from New York. Susan, give us a sense of what's in fact playing out from the perspective of the Americans there, because Caroline Levitt was very dismissive, saying that Cyril Ramaphosa is just running his mouth when Ramaphosa clearly announced that there will be some form of American participation. And also the Americans have expressed a reservation about a joint communique. So what can we expect from the American side in the G20 summit?
So what we're seeing right now is one of the examples about how the Trump administration has no problem distancing itself from multilateral gatherings. And this is just the latest example of that. You talked about the statement that a diplomat put out, a memo saying that after the G20, not only will the United States not participate, but if there is a leaders' declaration without the United States and without the United States supporting what is in that declaration, the U.S. is not going to accept that. The U.S. opposes issuance of any G20 summit outcome document under the premise of a consensus G20 position without U.S. agreement. That is the diplomatic note. Now, as Khaldun also mentioned, the issue is about human rights violations that the Trump administration perceives as happening in South Africa, but also one can't help but wonder if it has to do with South Africa's relations and positions when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict and, of course, its relationship with Russia and China. Nonetheless, it appears that the 2026 G20 summit is expected to not only take place in the United States, but on one of Trump's properties in Miami.
It's going to be very interesting to watch out as to what actually plays out in the G20 summit that is happening in Johannesburg, and of course the next one that will happen in the United States of America. Thank you very much indeed to Khaldun Ongmu. But Susan, I request you to stay on with us because I want you to weigh in on another crucial development that is unfolding at this moment in the United States. So this is a big legal setback for the Trump administration, and what has happened is this. A federal judge has ordered for a halt on the deployment of the National Guard troops in capital Washington, D.C. The district judge, Gia Cobb, an appointee of the former President Joe Biden, has ordered for an end to the deployment after finding it unlawful. The judge ruled that the Trump administration had overstepped its authority by bringing the National Guard troops from out of the state to patrol the Capitol. However, she paused her ruling until the 11th of December to allow for the Trump administration to file an appeal. Now, on the 11th of August, Trump had ordered for more than 2,000 National Guard troops to patrol Washington, claiming that the city was a filthy and crime-ridden embarrassment. This is what he's talking about, the capital city of the United States of America. Now, earlier Trump had said that National Guard troops to the Democratic-run Los Angeles and Memphis to combat crime and to help enforce his crackdown on undocumented migrants. Now, federal judges have temporarily blocked the deployment of the troops in two other Democrat-controlled cities, that is Chicago and Portland. And the American Supreme Court is expected to deliver the final word pretty soon on whether the actions are lawful. Now, Trump's extraordinary domestic use of the National Guard was also challenged by California earlier this year, while a district court judge had ruled it unlawful. An appeals court panel had allowed the Los Angeles deployment to proceed. Now, Trump has denied charges that he's strictly targeting cities that are run by his political opponents for his anti-crime campaign and immigration crackdown. All right, my colleague Susan Tehrani is still with us from New York. So, Susan, this is something that's going to be seen as a clear legal setback for the Trump administration, where he wanted to deploy the National Guard to Washington, D.C., a city that he's calling a crime-infested city, the capital city of the United States of America. But is Donald Trump actually overstepping, his jurisdiction? Because a lot of the cities that he's talking about, which are said to be crime-infested, that he wants to crack down on immigration, they're all appear to be Democrat, that is the opposition-ruled cities and states. Why is he not sending the National Guard to the Republican states?
Well, he could send the National Guard to Republican states, and that wouldn't cause so much controversy because usually the Republican governors and also mayors of those cities and states would be open to that, and they would actually openly ask for it. There have been a number of Republican states where he's mentioned, but that hasn't happened. But you're right, half of it has to do with politics, another half has to do with the fact that most of these blue states, and New York is one of them, they have very lax criminal laws and bail laws. So crime seems to be more rampant because of just the judicial makeup and the way that crime is being treated and punished in these states and cities. Not all of them, but the majority of them. So that's the Trump administration's justification. But nonetheless, as you mentioned, we saw the D.C. Attorney General file a lawsuit against the Trump administration to this judge, and this federal judge said that because we know that National Guards are deployed in Washington, D.C. right now as we speak, and there is just a debate on whether or not they've actually helped or hurt the situation on the ground. But nonetheless, the judge didn't say that they have to pack up right away and leave. What it's saying is we'll give you about 21 days or even more until the Trump administration is able to appeal this ruling. So the story continues, the legal work continues, and the debate over the National Guards and whether or not they should be deployed or not continues. Just one very quickly, I want to say COP found that while the president does have the authority to protect federal functioning and property, he can't unilaterally deploy the D.C. National Guard to help with crime control. So the president has the authority to protect federal buildings, but this seems to be a lot more vast and not so comfortable for these leaders in these cities.
Interesting. We'll have to see as to how this case, of course, unfolds. Thank you very much indeed, Susan Tehrani, for joining us from New York and getting us all those details there. All right, let's now shift our attention to what is happening in Mexico, where President Claudia Sheinbaum is under increasing pressure. Now, thousands of the demonstrators, in fact, took to the streets of Mexico City to protest insecurity, the rising violence and corruption within the country. The demonstration was organized primarily by the Gen Z group protesters, marched from the Angel of Independence Monument through several streets towards Zocalo Square, and the participants waved the Mexican flags, voiced frustration about the worsening security conditions and government corruption.
Unfortunately, in this country, every day someone says there will be no impunity, but things are easily forgotten. What do I expect from this march? That it is a very peaceful march like that day, where we divert and reach the Zocalo, where we hope not to see that group right.
However, the protesters were stopped from marching to the Zocalo Square, where the Mexican President Sheinbaum was attending the 115th anniversary of the Mexican Revolution. During her speech, the president rejected violence as a political path. The fresh round of protests have come days after a large demonstration was called by the Gen Z activists protesting the assassination of the Europan mayor, Carlos Manzo, who was assassinated earlier in the month after confronting the drug trafficking groups. And at least about 120 people, mostly police officers, were injured in the protest.
We're here because we're tired of the repression, of the violence that people in Mexico are living through, of the lack of medicines, the lack of justice, the extortion, the protection rackets, of being blocked by police from passing. We're Mexicans, and we also have the right to protest and to speak out.
Now, President Sheinbaum, who took charge last year, has faced some sharp criticism in recent weeks over her security strategy. The president has questioned the motive behind the last week's march, calling it inorganic and a paid-for protest, suggesting that it was in fact being financed from abroad. Nigeria's court has convicted the Biafran separatist leader, putting an end to the decade-long legal battle surrounding the leader of Nigeria's indigenous people of Biafra. The court has convicted Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the banned LGBO ethnic group, on 7 charges related to a slew of offences committed between 2018 and 2021. The prosecution has accused Kanu's call for independence as an act that threatens violence and has demanded for a death penalty for the indigenous leader. But the presiding judge has declined this request. Instead, the court has jailed him for life.
The judiciary has salvaged Nigeria from the claws, from the oppression of the proscribed IPOB. The court has also pronounced death sentence on Eastern Security Network, which was the military wing of IPOB. Today, God has brought an end to injustice, oppression, suffered by our brothers and sisters of the eastern states of Nigeria.
The defense, on the other hand, has slammed Kanu's conviction for aggregating words to an act of terrorism. The Separatist Leaders' Council will be appealing the verdict.
Mazi Nnamdi Kanu may broadcast, and so what? And you convict him for terrorism for mere words in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. What kind of precedent is being laid? So from here, we are heading to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal is the only court in this country, or the next court in this country, that sits as a jury.
Now, the call for independence of Biafra is not new. A secessionist region in southeastern Nigeria, Biafra has witnessed a 3-year period of civil war from 1967 until 1970. The violence then claimed thousands of lives, and over 1 million people are said to have died of starvation.
Hello?
And our correspondent Louisa Olani has sent us this report from Nigeria's capital on the courtroom battle surrounding the separatist leader Kanu. Listen in.
Embattled IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu has been sentenced to life imprisonment by Justice James Omotosho, who chose a lesser penalty despite the offences carrying a possible death sentence. Kanu was convicted on multiple terrorism-related counts, including issuing deadly threats, ordering sit-at-home actions, and inciting attacks on security personnel. He was also labelled an international terrorist for allegedly plotting attacks on the British High Commission and U.S. Embassy. His lawyers plan to appeal to the Supreme Court, while some supporters have condemned the ruling as political. Kanu's case has remained one of Nigeria's most protracted legal battles since his 2015 arrest. From Lagos, Nigeria, Louisa Olani, WION The World.
All right, let's also now take a quick look as to what else is making headlines in the political corridors of the world. The Peru's former president, Martin Vizcarra, has pleaded not guilty in a trial for alleged corruption. The charges stem from his time as the governor of the southern Moquegua region.
I am innocent, entirely and utterly innocent of the acts that are being examined today. If I trust in justice, I also trust that you will evaluate all of the arguments presented by the prosecution and the defense, and that you will act correctly. That is why the possibility of fleeing has never crossed my mind.
Vizcarra served as Peru's president from 2018 till 2020 and is facing allegations of receiving approximately 2.4 million sols, that's about $710,000, in bribes from construction companies between 2014 and 2016. If convicted, the former Peruvian president could, of course, face up to 15 years in prison. And Bihar's new cabinet selection witnesses a significant shift in portfolio allocation. Returning chief minister and the JDU chief Nitish Kumar has given the crucial home department to its alliance partner, the BJP. Samrat Chaudhary of the Bharatiya Janata Party will be heading Bihar's home ministry. This is the first time in over 20 years of being chief minister that Nitish Kumar will not be holding the home department in Bihar. Bolivia's president has abolished the country's justice ministry in response to a scandal involving the head of this department. The minister in the middle of an old scandal is the former lawyer, Freddy Vidovich. who was sentenced in 2015 to 3 years of imprisonment for bribery and aiding the attempted escape of a businessman with links to a former president serving time for corruption. After the scandal became public, the incumbent president replaced the Justice Minister on the 18th of November. But shortly afterwards, he announced a decision to abolish the ministry altogether. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. This is Mohammed Saleh signing off. Thanks for watching.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
Africa hosts the G20 for the first time, and Johannesburg becomes the world's power stage. 42 countries will gather and participate for G20 Leaders Summit. 20 G20 members, excluding the United States, 16 guest countries, and 6 countries representing regional economic communities in Africa, the Caribbean, and the East Asia. WION will bring you all the latest developments from G20 Leaders Summit from Johannesburg, South Africa.
As 120